Hey everyone, welcome to the Fireside Chat number 21 on Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. I'm Tracy Friedlander, and today, back by popular demand, we have Jonathan Fink, freelance cellist and extremely successful real estate agent in the Philadelphia area. In this talk, we broadened the horizons for how finances can look as a musician. You are actually in the driver's seat if you choose to be. This is proactive and empowering advice for any musician who struggles with money goals and improving finances in their career. How could it look when you get serious about applying your already honed skills as a musician to this area of your life? What if you used the advantage that you have as a musician that most people don't have and applied it to your finances and creating income? We talk about this and so much more on today's show. Before we begin, a couple of things. Please join the conversation at facebook.com/crushingclassical as well as Crushing Classical on Instagram. If you love our content, it would mean the world to us for you to comment and share it with your classical musician friends and colleagues. I'd like to thank Fix Music for being a sponsor of Crushing Classical. FixMusic.com is your online resource for affordable, high-quality sheet music. Fix also offers unique buying options for individuals, teachers, and schools. Whether you have a large private teaching studio or you run a music program, Fix has a solution for you. Contact them through their website for more information. Fix offers priority and priority express shipping at super affordable rates, meaning they do not pad their shipping rates to make money. If you need sheet music fast, Fix will expedite it to you as inexpensively as possible. Also, remember to use the discount code CRUSH and get 10% off your order. Let's get started. Hey guys, hey John, hey Eileen, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
I'm good. How are you guys?
So we've got John Fink back to talk about money. And one reason I wanted to bring you back on the podcast is because the first episode with you on it, we talked about money and it hit a nerve with our listeners in a really good way. And you've got an abundance mindset when it comes to money, and classical musicians, I think they can really learn something from you. So I wanted to ask you a few questions about that. So thanks for being on again.
But first of all, I mean, has anybody ever been on twice? I mean, this must be, like, is this like hosting Saturday Night Live? That, am I
Yes.
am I in a special club now because I've been
You
on
are
more
in
than
a special club. Yes, you are in a special club. In
because
fact,
I
you're
like to
the
be in
only
special
person-
clubs.
Yeah, you're the only person we've had on twice, and honestly, it was because of the response we got to your first podcast, the first podcast we did with you, that we wanted to bring you on again.
I appreciate that. I like to be special, so that
You are
means a lot.
special.
You're
Thank you.
special, yes. And it was a huge response. We were thrilled about it, and it told us a lot that people want to talk about money, and I want to talk about money. So let's talk about it.
All right, let's do it.
So first thing, what money mindset and or financial advice would you give to somebody just graduating from school with a bachelor's degree in music?
Wow, that's a really great question. And I should point out that to the extent that I'm going to give advice, this is all advice that I absolutely did not follow.
Yeah, and actually, that's why we want to ask you this, John, because I'm sure you didn't follow this advice, and part of why we wanted to have you on is because you have the gift of being able to look back. And you're also still a musician. That's why why your advice is so valuable.
Yeah.
Right. So here's I guess if I were to go back and do it again, here are some things I would think of. First of all, I think that maybe kids who are graduating from college with any kind of degree haven't got much of a clue about money, and so I would caution them to try to keep your money thoughts positive. So in other words, don't fall into the trap, especially as an artist, of thinking of money as being an evil thing, that it somehow pollutes your art, and that if you make money, that would be bad. Money is a good thing, and there's nothing wrong with including it in your thoughts about how your life is gonna move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's important at the same time to somehow, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but to somehow be aware of what you're making doing the things that you're doing, whether they be playing music or not, but keep track of what your income is and what your expenses are. And then right away, I think this might be the most important thing. Right away, start thinking about income as not, and we've talked about this before, I have to go get a job that will pay my bills, but start thinking about multiple income sources.
Mm-hmm.
Write down 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 things you could do within or around your art that could bring some cash flow into your life. So other than practicing and winning this big job, what are some other things that you could do besides? You're going to be playing gigs, probably. You're going to be doing some teaching or educational things. You're going to be, I don't know what else, maybe you work making reeds if you're, one of those folk, or you work fixing instruments, or you get a job working in a factory where they make instruments, or maybe you work at a music store, or whatever it is. But start thinking about other multiple income sources, and just be open to the idea that not all of them will involve playing your instrument. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to when I was in my 20s in Chicago, and I'm thinking like I just didn't think about that in that way. I thought, oh gee, why don't I get called for this? Why did that person get called for that teaching opportunity? I was so I was so lame. It didn't occur to me to make things happen for myself. And I think it's embarrassing to admit, but didn't just grab the bull by its horns. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, sit down and figure out these are things that are possible. And even when you make a move towards something that's possible, something else might come out of it that you didn't know could come.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. I mean, if you throw a bunch of feelers out there, you never know what's going to come from whatever you're thinking of, and absolutely create your own opportunities. If if you don't, you may never, when you first graduate from bachelor's, or if you just graduate from college, you've got a couple of things really going for you that somebody like me or anybody else on this call doesn't have. And that is, number one, your ability to play your instrument is probably at its highest.
Totally.
Right? I mean,
absolutely.
you're
Yes.
never going to be better than you are in the first 5 years out of college.
Absolutely.
And so from that standpoint, yes, you should be, if auditioning is something you want to do and you want to be in orchestras, then this is a good time to do it. But the other thing is you also have more time than you've probably ever had in your life.
Yeah,
and
that's a big one.
Not a lot of commitments. Most likely you don't have kids yet. You're not tied down to a relationship. Maybe you are, but you're likely to have more freedom to explore different things and take advantage of that. Don't pigeonhole yourself right out of the gate. Be open. Just be open to some possibilities about what this career could be, and listen to some of these podcasts and see where people have ended up. And think, wow, if it's okay to think about money. I mean, I think it's almost important that we say that to people. Like, there's nothing wrong with going, wow, if I did that, and I'm doing some simple math, and if I contracted 6 jobs a month and I played this, and I could be making blah, and how would that feel? And start taking some notes about that and putting that, maybe putting that into a goal. Have some goals. Mm-hmm. What are your financial goals for your first year out of college? How much money would you like to make? How much money do you feel like you would want to make in order to live in the kind of place that you want to live and do the kinds of things that you want to do? And how much would it cost for you to go take 5 auditions this year? What is the cost of that? And then what is the cost of living where you want to live? And then what is the cost of going out to your favorite sushi place 3 times a week? And how much does that all equal? And then the income side of that, where will that income come from? Start thinking about these things as real items instead of what most people do, which is get up in the morning, look how much money is in their bank account, and go, oh, I can't really do anything. I'll just sit around the house.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I want to mention too is I think what you're really pointing to here is you need to have a relationship with numbers. Like if there's one thing
That's
you
right.
need to begin with, you need to get, if you don't have one, you need to get a relationship with numbers like early. Early,
Yeah.
early, early. Don't wait until you're 40 to get a relationship to numbers.
I think that's great. I think that's a great way to put it. Don't be afraid of the numbers. The numbers aren't going to be super impressive right out of the gate, but that's okay. You still know what they are.
Yep.
Yeah.
What is your income? What are your expenses? You can't fix a problem if you can't look at it and identify it. And
Yep.
there are a lot of people who are going to graduate from college and they're going to go, my expenses are $1,500 a month plus this, plus that, and my income is $4,000 a year. Oh my God.
Right.
Right.
But you know what? Knowing that is a good thing to know.
Yep.
It's you want to know your numbers.
Yeah. I can say I
I
never
could
did
tell you
that.
that. I mean, I'm not going to, but I could tell you exactly what my expenses are and exactly what our income is, and
Same here.
sometimes it's terrifying,
Yep.
But you know what? I'd rather know than be taken by surprise. And so know your numbers is a really important thing. And once you know them, no matter how low they are, you can always now you're in a position to go, well, I could do better than that this year.
Yeah,
If I
yeah.
only played 6 more jobs this year and took on 3 more students a week, look what I could do. If you don't know how to use Excel or Google Sheets, at least in some basic way,
And they're very basic programs, let's be honest.
they're
Yeah.
not super difficult. Um,
That's where all
wow,
this
I mean,
stuff is.
if you're bored and you have nothing to do and all you're doing is sitting around the house practicing, you could take an online Google Sheets course for free, I'm sure, or
It's
watch
true,
a couple
yeah.
of
You
YouTube
can.
videos, and it can change your life. I mean, I hate to say it, but spreadsheets are amazing. They're a
They
great way to
are.
keep track of everything. So,
I know, and it's funny you mentioned all this because twice a year I sit down and I go through. I actually just did it. I did it last Friday. I sit down and I go through my expenses, and I look and see what is automatically being debited. Do I still want that?
right,
What is, like, and you can do it with credit cards, you can do it with debit cards. What's automatically being charged? And I ended up canceling a bunch of charges. I ended up reducing some bills that I had. I ended up doing a bunch of work this last Friday that was amazing. And it's some of the best work that I did for the year. And I do that twice a year. Most people, though, are never really fully aware of how much they're spending. I can tell you exactly what my expenses are. I can tell you exactly how much, debt I'm paying off. I can tell you like down to the dollar how
right,
much. And
right.
I think most people can't actually tell you that. They
No,
never look. They don't even
no.
look at it.
Well, I mean, it's very easy to just take an attitude like, well, I've got enough money to get through the day, so it must be okay. But
Right.
and lots of people are going to live that way. But if you want to advance yourself financially a little bit, then the first step to that is, and in any business, it's the same thing. They teach us that in Keller Williams with our businesses. What are your numbers? How many closed deals do you have this year? How many closed deals did you have last year at this time? What are you doing to make those numbers better this year if you want to? Do you want to work harder this year than you did last year? Or was what you did last year what you want to do again this year? But these are decisions that you get to make. Do you want to take more jobs? Do you want to play more weddings? How many weddings did you play last year? Do you want to play more weddings this year? But if you're just flowing along and just kind of going, well, I guess I'll take that one. Why are you taking it? Are you taking that job because it's part of a goal system that you set up to do more jobs like that?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you just taking it because they called and, you don't have any plans and whatever?
Yep.
So even if what you're doing doesn't seem like it, everything you're doing right now is going to be part of your career moving forward, whether you think it is or not.
Ha ha, Tracy knows this all too well.
I hate to say that, but it's like, I mean, except for even the 6 people out of 100 who win real jobs, air quotes real, are still probably going to do a lot of the other things too, and you should embrace that. So this is all parts of stuff that I would consider important coming right out of school for young people. And
Yeah.
I don't know, do young people listen to this podcast? I'm just curious.
Yes.
They do.
I
Yep.
would not
Yep.
have it as a youngster. So
Listen,
I'm impressed.
if I would have heard that whole spiel that you just said 20 years ago, first of all, after I shit my pants, I would have cleaned myself up and,
Thanks.
opened up my computer if I had one, which I didn't. But
Right.
But even taking out a piece of paper and writing on it is better than not having a computer.
right. And you know what? Oh my God. I mean, in so many ways nowadays things are easy and in so many easier and in so many ways they're harder. Like I know that you can get like a Google laptop for like $200 or something. I don't know
Right.
anything about it, but I know that if you can't afford an Apple product, there are other options for people nowadays. And when I was a kid, I remember that I had this old computer that my dad gave me, and I plugged it into my dial-up modem so I could find a new apartment. And it took me all day because the internet was so slow to go
Yeah.
Yeah.
online and do this rudimentary website that they had in Chicago to find apartments, but which is not like that anymore. But
My first income tracking was in a book that you had these books that had ledgers in them.
Yeah, ledgers. That's how I did
Ledgers.
it. I used ledgers back. I mean, I'm with you, John. I did the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I up until at least very recently, I had that first ledger, and it's terrifying to look at it because it's like, I wasn't making any money at all. I mean, it
Sure.
was, but I knew how much money I was making. Even then, I have always been that kind to, I don't like surprises, and I don't
That's
handle
yep.
surprises well, and
Me either.
so I will do anything to avoid being surprised.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to know how bad it is,
Yep.
if
That's
it's
me.
bad, or how good
Yep.
it is, God forbid.
Yep.
If it's good, I want to know that too,
Yeah,
so
but I definitely though I'm with you. I want to know how bad it is. I don't want to just guess how bad it is. I want to know how bad it is.
yeah,
Like down to the dollar. I want to know.
and there's so much what is the word, comfort in, I mean,
Yes.
I can be honest with you, so much about being successful financially is about being willing to fail financially.
Yes.
And I have
Yes.
done my fair share
Yes.
of that. I mean,
Yes.
I
Yes.
have months where, I'll be honest, like right now I'm kind, it's August, and I got a couple of big expenses looming, and I just paid my son's first semester of college,
Oh boy.
and money is like flowing out like there's no tomorrow. And I meet with my financial person, and I go over it, and I come out of there and I feel so much better about it
Mm-hmm.
because I know
Yeah.
so don't, I mean, that's the thing, is that, and how do you it's like that whole business of, well, here's another piece of advice for young people.
Yeah.
Pay your bills on time. And you know why? Because they're still going to be there in a week. You're going to end up paying them.
True.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to pay more.
You'll just end up with a late fee is what will happen.
You'll just pay more. You'll just pay more in 2 weeks. And so you get out of that mindset of, I don't want to look at it. I'm afraid to look at it, so I'll just ignore it. And I know how hard that can be for some people.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people out there who do all this stuff, and that's great. But these are the things I struggled with growing up.
Yeah.
But you know what I like? Oh, go
nobody
ahead,
wants
Eileen.
to deal with it. I was just going to say, nobody, there's very few people who actually want to deal with the reality of the numbers. They don't want to confront the numbers. And so I think it's really valuable what you're saying. Tracy, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I agree about that. And I wanted to say what I did appreciate that you said a little while ago was looking at your numbers and then saying, this is the apartment I want to live in. This is the neighborhood I'd like to live in. I'd like to go out for sushi such and such amount of times a week or whatever. Those are things that you should be allowed to say to yourself. I want to live in this neighborhood. I was telling Eileen the other day that as the years went by in Chicago, I started in good neighborhoods. And before I left town, I was in just quite frankly, a neighborhood I wouldn't consider living in ever again.
Yeah, she was in shoot 'em up drug land. That's where she was.
I was.
That's where she was. Yeah.
I was on Spalding Street in west of Logan Square. It was scary. And there were, it was not, I paid extra to have a garage spot because I didn't want to park in front of my place at night because I was just too afraid of being out there. It was, and yeah, so my rent was only 500 as opposed to maybe 900, but
Uh-huh.
still, I like the idea of going, this is where I want to live, and I'm going to figure out a way to make the money so that I can have a certain lifestyle that I want. Even if it's not, I'm living in a mansion in Beverly Hills, but I'm living in a studio, or, I have a roommate, but it's in a nicer neighborhood or something like that. We were talking about roommates yesterday. Eileen and I was saying, I should have had more roommates instead of trying to live by myself. That was one savings I could have done. I could have searched longer for a roommate to save more money, but I didn't.
Right. Well, I think a lot of times what happens with people is they get out of college and they're living wherever they're living, and they find an apartment. Maybe they have a roommate, maybe they don't, and then they just we're trying to get by. We're trying to make our rent. You know what I mean? Like, I remember having this mindset where I would literally, I'm not even saying it's a bad mindset, I would literally collect checks that I had earned and put them in a special pile until it was enough money to pay my rent, and then take them, put them in the bank, and write the rent check. But I think the alternate way to do it, and the more grown-up thing to do, if you wanted to do that, would be to create budgets and say, okay, well, here's my current budget. Right now, my rent is whatever my rent is, and here are my expenses, and that's how much it's going to cost me for a year. And in order to, if I wanted to live in a place that was this much, here's how much that would cost in a year, and here's how many gigs of the kind I'm doing and the teaching that I'm doing, here's how much of this I would need to do in order to create that.
Yeah.
And then, based on that, you decide, well, is it worth it to me to want to live in a nicer place if it means I have to take on X more students or do these more gigs? Is that a possibility? If so, what are some actions I can take that will create more opportunities for myself so that I can achieve these financial goals?
Mm-hmm.
And here's the woo-woo part. If you put it out there in the world and you say to the world, I believe I can do twice as many gigs next year as I did this year, then, what's the worst that could happen? You only do, you don't do twice as many. You only do, 40% as many. But my point is that you have to learn how to believe in yourself that you can do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with attaching money to that. And I think that's something that, for musicians especially. Now, in real estate, it's all money. So any goal in real estate has to do with money, right?
Sure.
So you sell more houses because when you sell more houses, you help more people and make more money, right? So it's very simple. But in the arts, there's this stigma that we talked about before that it's like, well, it's not really about money. But I think that, as a young person, the sooner you can kind of get over that and go, well, you know what, I want to be able to live a good life and do this. And so how do I make these things work so that I can do that?
Right, exactly. Well, I'm glad you brought up real estate because that's another thing we were going to talk about today. And I know that you had said before that, you strongly believe in real estate as an investment. And you've said a house is your first step toward wealth. And however, a lot of classical musicians are not only they have a situation with their income sometimes coming out of school, but also classical musicians are hesitant to commit to buying property where they don't know necessarily where their career is going to take them, if they're going to stay in the same town or if they're going to be moving. So especially if they're taking auditions. So what do you think about that?
There's a lot there. Sometimes there's, obviously there are limitations. If you really don't have the money, you don't have the money.
Uh-huh.
Houses can be sold again. You can buy a house and sell it again. Look, if you're actively taking auditions and you are, making the finals and it's just a matter of minutes before you're going to win something, I get it. What percentage of the population is that? That's kind of that 3% that we often talk about. So let's just assume you're not in that group, because I think that's what we're talking about. So you're freelancing, and you're taking some auditions and you'd like to move on to something better, but in the meantime, you're working, you're playing all the local jobs. So it takes, the sooner you can get yourself into a property, even if it's in an area where you're not going to stay for, say, you don't know where you're going to be in 4 years or 5 years. A lot of times, not every time, but most times it still makes sense to purchase, because that property will, if it doesn't go up in value, I mean, you can't predict the world. Of course, anything can happen. And there was a 10-year period there where things didn't go as well. But for the most part in real estate, you're going to do okay in 4 to 5 years. I've got people who did, I mean, we're in a very up market right now. I've got people who purchased a property 2 years ago and just sold it for literally for $100,000 more. They make $50,000 a year just by owning their property.
Wow.
And then, there's nothing else in the world that allows you to do that in the way that real estate does. The reason that real estate is such an amazing investment opportunity is that you don't need your own money to buy it.
Okay.
And when you think about that, you're borrowing the money from somebody else, a bank, to buy an investment. Whereas with stocks, you can't. You have to have the money to buy and invest in stocks. Yes, you need some of your own money, but shockingly little if you're in a specific price point. In fact, I have a settlement tomorrow with some really nice people in the Philadelphia area who are musicians, and they're buying a home that's like $125,000. They're using an FHA, a very low down payment loan. The entire transaction is going to cost them in the $5,000 or $6,000 range in cash.
Wow.
Wow.
So yeah, if you don't have, and they have a combination of freelance income, and they both have teaching, smaller teaching jobs, and they were able to qualify for a mortgage. And you know what? They're making a great investment at a very young age. And will they stay in this house for the rest of their lives? Of course not. Mm-hmm. But they'll sell it down the line, and in the meantime, or they'll rent it out, and it'll become, rental income for them. So it's easy to wait. It's easy to wait and wait and wait and wait, and then become one of those people that's been renting the same apartment for 20 years.
Yeah.
And let's face it, renting. Here's the real disadvantage of renting is that you're basically throwing that money in the street. It's not going towards anything. Whereas when you make a payment on your home, you're paying down your interest. So a portion of the payment you're actually paying to yourself. It's forced savings in essence, if that makes sense, because you're borrowing money from the bank to purchase the home, and then you're paying back the money to the bank. And so every payment that you make towards the bank becomes value in your property that belongs to you now. Mm-hmm. So at the end, if you get to the end of the loan, or even halfway through the loan, you in essence own that much more of the property, and then you get that money back when you sell it, or you can take that money out of the home with the home equity line or whatever. But it's not just going into the street. You're not just throwing money away month after month after month, which is what renting really is. Another huge, and tell me if I'm going too fast, but another huge benefit of purchasing, especially if you're going to use a mortgage, and is that mortgage interest, the interest that you pay the bank on your mortgage, is tax deductible. Mm-hmm. So I should be careful to say that I'm not an accountant, and everybody should check with their accountant about these things. But here's the thing. Interest mortgage, at least for the time being, and I'm looking at the IRS.gov webpage, and an itemized deduction that is allowed is home mortgage interest. Now here's where I'm going to get a little technical, and it's going to sound a little bit like I'm an accountant, but this is a huge point about home purchasing. When you file your taxes, a single person filing their taxes has a standard deduction. In other words, if you made $30,000, you pay tax on that $30,000 minus your standard deduction, which in 2017 is $6,300. So you get to take $6,300 away from your income. If it's $30,000, then the income you're paying taxes on is, help me out, 23,700.
23,700, yep.
Okay? So now, in order to deduct your expenses against money that you make, you need to be able to exceed that $6,300.
Right.
You can't begin to deduct your other stuff until you have deductions totaling more than $6,300.
Right.
If you have a home mortgage, you're in the clear, because it's almost impossible to have a home mortgage of any amount that the interest will not equal at least $6,000 or $7,000.
Right.
So right out of the gate now, every expense that you have associated with playing music or whatever your careers are become deductible in a way that they weren't. You're not overcoming that $6,300.
Right. I was thinking about that too, because of that standard deduction thing, because that's what I did before I rented or before I had a house. Before.
Right.
And yeah, you
would add up all your expenses and you'd go, well, I've got about $4,000.
Right.
Can't deduct it because it's not more than the $6,300.
Right.
So you're paying this mortgage and you're paying the mortgage interest, which you get to deduct. So in essence, you get that back at the end of the year, because if you don't have to pay taxes on it, it's like having free money, basically. Like any money that you don't have to give to the government is the same as taking money for yourself, is kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So that's why expenses become your friend. It's like, well, if I could, if I could buy a new piece of musical equipment for $400 or give $400 to the U.S. government, choose one.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy choice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is where becoming when you become a little bit more sophisticated about what you're spending your money on, why you're spending your money, is it furthering your career goals? Is it a deductible expense for what I'm doing? You have to have a relationship with a tax account so you can call him and go, hey, if I buy a new electric guitar, can I write that off? And he may say, well, in your income, it's not always 100% write off, right? Some things you write off the entire amount. Some things it's a portion of it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you exactly what they are. And that's for a professional to tell you. But the point is that once you have that mortgage interest, it kind of lifts you up over that lip so that now you're in a better position to deduct more expenses. And at the same time, the other half of the payment, half of the mortgage payment is interest, the other half is principal. That part you're giving back to yourself.
Right. Well, and actually, can I just tag on to this a little bit? Because you mentioned in another conversation we had that one thing that, and you mentioned it in everything you just said, but I think it's important to point out, you mentioned I'm not an accountant, and, if you're going to do things like this, you need to check with an accountant. So one thing I know you believe strongly in is you need to pay someone else to do your taxes, and you need to seek outside advice. Like, you can't keep your own counsel where money's concerned. Can you go into that a bit? Because I think this is a mistake people make they wait too long to get this thing handled that I just said. Like, they wait way too long.
Well, I think it's important to look at your life as most people need a kind of a series of coaches. And I'm going to give some credit to Keller Williams for this one too, because we have one of Gary Keller's kind of original things called the 6 Perspectives. But basically, musicians have been coached their whole lives. Like we wouldn't, most of us in college wouldn't dream of performing a new work without taking it to our teacher first, right? And getting their fingerings and their bowings and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But when you get out into the real world, very few of us get coaching and other things. So it's so important. Get a tax person that will sit down with you and help you with your goals, and is somebody that will respond to your questions, and God forbid that you get audited, will show up and go to that audit for you so that you don't have to go. You don't want to be anywhere near that.
No way.
Nobody wants you there, and you don't want to be there. You don't want to represent yourself at something like that.
Right.
Yep.
Get a financial person right away. It doesn't matter if you don't have a lot of money to invest. If they won't meet with you because you don't have a lot of money to invest, keep asking until you find one that will. Because there's a lot more to be gained from financial advisors.
You know what? That's really interesting, John. I'll tell you why. Because a lot of financial advisors, like I've worked with a lot of people in my career as far as business consulting and whatnot, and a lot of them are like, "Yeah, I only work with people who are 50 and older." And I think that's actually the stigma that's out there, is that you can't actually get financial advice unless you're over 50. And I think that's probably bullshit. But I just want to know what you have to say about that.
Well, the financial advisor that I work with, and I already asked in advance that I can plug her. Her name is Christy Barilotti, and she's here in Philadelphia. But she works with people in, I don't know about all states, but bunches of them. Now we pay her for her service. It's not free, but we literally sit down with Christy once a month. Mm-hmm. And when we first started doing that, we hadn't bought any products from her at all. And she works with a number of people that I have referred to in this way. She will help you make financial decisions. She will help you gather information. She will say, well, what are your income? What are your expenses? What are your financial goals? Let's try to figure out how to get from here to there. And it's not all about saving as much money as humanly possible and then, retiring, in that traditional sense. Because a lot of musicians, a lot of careers like this don't have retirements in that way necessarily. Mm-hmm. It's not as traditional in that sense. So right. So they do exist. I know they do exist. And the point is you have to seek out this advice in the same way that you seeked out that perfect teacher for yourself when you knew what you wanted from a teacher. And you need to find that in a financial advisor. You need to find that in a tax accountant. And, you need to find that spiritually for yourself, whether it's at a church or a synagogue or a yoga studio. But you need to have some kind of spiritual guidance. You need to have tax guidance. You need to have financial guidance. And you need to have, whatever else kind of guidance you need. Everybody... physical, if you're working out, I know I am, and it's painful, but I wouldn't go to the gym and just start lifting crap. I'd probably hurt myself, So I really believe in coaching. I believe if you own a business, you have a business coach. I have a business coach. And I value their opinions, and I'm open. Part of my mantra is that I'm coachable. And let's face it, this is a huge advantage that musicians have. We're coachable people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You did not get through a bachelor's degree in music in any school in this country without being coachable.
True.
So congratulations. Yeah. You have a skill that like 80% of America doesn't have. You're coachable.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the question is, can you apply that to other parts of your life?
Absolutely.
You're so willing to listen to somebody and try their fingering or their bowing for this piece.
Right.
But are you willing to listen to somebody who says, you might want to consider these things financially or whatever. So right. That's, find the people that can help you. Try not to do these things yourself if you can, and you can afford it.
Well, you're right.
If you have no money and you have no gigs and you have nothing going on, then you're not listening to this podcast. I can't imagine that's who's listening to this. I'm assuming that talented people who have a lot going on and want to kind of break through to the next level. That's what we're talking about. These are breakthrough concepts.
Yeah.
Not struggling to get out of the start line concepts.
Right. Right.
Well, and I want to add something to what you're saying. I think is important. The fact that you're coachable, the fact that if you're listening to this podcast and you've got through a undergraduate degree. I mean, even if you didn't graduate and you got through 3 years of an undergraduate degree, you still were coachable.
Right.
I think the other thing that's important is I think musicians get really one-track minded about. If I have some problem with my playing, I'm going to find the teacher I need to find. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to solve my problem. But they're not that way about, I'm going to find whatever money coach I need to find to get my money in order. I'm going to find whatever realtor I need to get to be able to buy a property. So in other words, they're very committed to the playing side, but then they forget to apply that level of grit to other areas of their life.
Yes.
And why is that? What,
do you get that?
Yeah. I mean,
Why
let's
is
dig
that?
down there. Why is that a thing that it's like, I'm going to work really hard on this 3 measures of the Haydn D major cello concerto, but in the meantime, I've got six overdue credit cards and can't pay my rent.
Let me just interject for a second. This is that
Tracy, I'm dying for you to respond to this. Actually,
okay. I'm like exploding. My head is exploding over here right now. This is that thing that I've mentioned on this show before, and in a future podcast, I'm having the person on who taught it to me, and I'm excited about it. But this is the transfer of learning thing. This is looking at what you're doing in your area of expertise as music, and he wasn't. I'm sure he will. We're going to talk about it on the podcast, but when he was teaching it, it was my conductor in Civic, Cliff Colnott. He was talking about it in terms of when you're a string player he's coaching the strings, he's talking to the strings about phrases, and you're in the brass section. Are you looking up at the ceiling and spacing out, or are you paying attention to what he's saying? Because probably you're going to have the same phrase a little later, and that way you're going to hear it and know what to do when that comes up. So that's the transfer of learning, like within an orchestra. But this is taking it to the next level, transfer of learning in your life, taking your skills that you have as a musician and applying them in other places. Like all these things that you're talking about. So imagine, I mean, this is what I've been thinking all along. If musicians took the entrepreneurial mindset that they have about their own musical skills. Like, I can do anything in the practice room if you give me the time. No musician ever says, I can't play that piece, so I'm not even going to try. No one does
I do.
That.
I say that a lot.
Most musicians don't. But you know what I'm saying? So people don't give up easily on their instrument because they're geared, they're like crazy about it. So, but then looking in these other areas, this is what's so exciting, is that they have the ability. They're coachable in that area. So I don't know why. I just think maybe it doesn't occur to them. It didn't occur to me. I'll tell you that much. I had problems with finances. I had problems with this and that and the other, but I didn't apply the same attitude that I had to my horn to these other areas. Always. Now I think differently, but I wasn't that way in my 20s.
I think that musicians, they have so much. So let's feel good about what we have as musicians, just naturally. And again, you've made it through some college program, and you have a degree in music, and you're out here working to some extent. You have perseverance out the butt, because you've already accomplished against most odds that most people wouldn't even want to deal with.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
like you got to be in the top 5% of people that you even do,
in perseverance,
exactly,
and overcoming obstacles, in concentration levels, being able to concentrate on something to the exclusion of other things, in a way that I guarantee you most people don't ever learn. Athletes and musicians learn how to concentrate on a level that most people do not learn. So you have this huge advantage. You've overcome issues. You've learned how to concentrate. You've got perseverance. All of these things can be applied to anything. anything in life, and you will excel at those things because if you're able to apply these traits, which you already have. There's not a question of whether you have them or not. You do have them. And that's why music education is so important, not because we're necessarily going to make a whole bunch of musicians, but because the things that we learn becoming musicians can be useful in other fields. I mean, have you ever noticed that a lot of amateur musicians are doctors?
Yeah.
I mean, there's
lawyers and all kinds of
lawyers.
things.
There's a lot of crossover there.
Yeah.
So because it requires that same kind of thing, and yet it does. And I don't want to generalize, and yet it does feel like sometimes that a lot of musicians don't transfer their abilities to other parts of their lives. That's what I've been able to do, is to take my fairly minimal musical talent and transfer it to other areas, and where it has managed to serve me well. So, but that I think that's kind of an interesting way to look at it. I think there are a lot of kids out there who are thinking that way. I don't know that there aren't none, but I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I just wanted to point it out because I think people don't think about this enough. Like we become, in school as musicians, we're so one-track minded that we forget there are many facets to life. And I think that, it starts there, but, there's not necessarily somebody there to say, hey, and that's why I'm so happy that we have this podcast, because people can hear this. This is not a conversation I was having when I got out of school. I can tell you that.
Oh, me neither. No, me neither.
Definitely not.
I wasn't having conversations. I was just trying to survive.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people still are. I think that in order to get out of that survive mentality, and I think it's not that hard. You have to sit down and dream. You have to go, okay, here's what it is right now, and here's what I'd like it to be. How do I get from here to there?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So and all that takes is time. And a lot of people who are just surviving have time because they're not working as much as they want to be. So, anyway.
Totally.
Well,
totally.
Getting into that mentality of what, getting out of that survival mode and into where you want to be, one way that you would do that is talk about income streams. And you had mentioned before income, passive and active income. So let's talk about those kind of things right now. Will you share your philosophy on the two types of income streams, passive and active?
Okay, well, so let's talk about what they are, and
yeah.
This is one of these economic things that people just know, but they don't know that they know it. Right? Everybody is this is gonna make sense to everybody that's listening, even if they've never taken an economics course.
Yep.
So passive income. Well, let's do active income is easy. Active income is when you get paid to go do something. And the most obvious version of that in our world is playing a job, right? You show up, you play 2 rehearsals in a concert, and you get $400. That's active income. Mm-hmm. If you don't go to the one rehearsal, you don't get paid for it. Right? If you don't go, if you blow off the whole thing, you don't get paid.
Right.
So you have to do the activity in order to get the income. So passive income is where you don't have to do anything and you get income anyway. Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of examples of this. The most basic one is interest income. If you have a whole bunch of money in the bank, it throws off money every month or year, and that's interest, and that's interest income. It's not a big number because interest rates in this country right now have been very low, which is good for lending, but not so great for saving, right?
Right.
Another obvious passive income type is rental income. So if you own a property and then you move out of it and you rent it for $1,000 a month, the tenant's paying you $1,000 a month to rent it, that's income.
Right. Or if you have an Airbnb, right?
Or if you have an Airbnb, whatever, rental income.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So are you doing anything for that? I mean, there may be duties associated with it, but you're not showing up and being paid by the hour.
Right.
You just sit there for the most part, and the rent checks come in, right? Another term for passive income is mailbox money.
Right.
Okay, so in the music world, where's the passive income in the music world? Well, one of the most obvious ones, and depending on where you live in the country, and what what worlds you're in, you may or may not be a part of this. I was never a part of any of this in Philadelphia, and that's not anybody's fault, but except maybe my own. But is recording residuals is what I'm talking about. So if you live in New York or you live in Los Angeles or wherever you live that you're making recordings, it's a real recording contract through the union, you're getting royalties or residuals based on those recordings. We've all heard about people who live in Los Angeles and play for Skywalker Studios and all this kind of stuff. They're getting residuals for these movies. They just literally go to the mailbox every day and there's checks there for I don't know how much because it's not my world, but that's passive income. Mm-hmm. Now, the nice thing about passive income is that it kind of doesn't matter how much it is, because if you didn't do anything to get it, then it's like, wow, it's great. I mean, if you only make $14, you go to your mailbox and there's a check for $14 because the movie you recorded the music for was on HBO last month. You're not pissed off that it's only $14. You're like, hey, there's $14 and I didn't do anything.
Right.
I already did that thing, 6 years ago when I recorded it. Okay. So now the question is, well, that's all great, but I don't live in Los Angeles and play for Skywalker Studios. But what can I do, right? What can I do to create some passive income for myself? And, you guys had the best story on your own podcast here of this that I have heard in a long time, and that's Phil Schneider's story about his lyric etudes, which...
man, that was such a great story. You're right.
Yeah.
And let's face it, Phil's lyric etude book, the first book, that's a famous book. Like you go to, I don't know if he said this, but I will. He goes to trumpet auditions and plays his own lyric etudes at the audition. It just cracks me up. Like, that would be a requirement. That would be something they want to hear. Something from Phil Schneider's lyric etudes.
Wow.
And he told that great story on your podcast about how he wrote it because he didn't have anything else to do, because he had just moved to a new town and didn't have enough work. And rather than sit around and feel sorry for himself, he was like, I think I'll write an etude book because this guy told me about this contest. He entered it in the contest and didn't win.
Right.
And didn't win the $5,000. And yet the book was published by a friend of his because he took the time after he didn't win to send it to every person he knew. Somebody loved it, published it, and it became one of the most popular trumpet books there is.
Yeah, and he still gets paid on it.
He's still getting paid. And like he said on the podcast, I guarantee I've made more than $5,000 from that.
Yeah, and the funny part is, what's so great about Phil's story is that he didn't decide to quit just because he didn't win. I think that was the best part of the story for me.
It was.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you know what? With the software that people have available now, let's face it, when I was a kid coming out of college, writing your own music book wouldn't have been that easy. Would have been a lot less easy than it is now. But if you've got, every kid coming out of college has Finale or whatever on their computers.
Yeah.
I mean, write a book. Write a scale book, for God. Write a gift book for whatever your instrument is.
It's true.
Probably using arrangements of stuff right now that you scrawled out for yourself to play wedding jobs. Put them in a book and self-publish it or get it published. The ideas are endless. Anybody can record now. Start recording yourself.
Yeah.
You've got nothing else to do.
I mean, hell, you can record some of the, if you're a really great player and, you could record some of the, you could actually generate recordings of some of the greatest etudes, the greatest solos, whatever. People would probably buy that from you,
Absolutely.
The Rose etudes for clarinet, people still play those, but it's really hard to find recordings of those. And there's anyone could have taken that on years ago. Anyone could have taken on recording all the Rose etudes. Anyone could have done it.
And you could probably get permission from International or whoever and pay a $30 licensing fee. And it's just, it's amazing that, and there are people that do that. I mean, I see people, but not enough. And that as you go down the line, that income stream just keeps on keeping on, and you don't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
I know. Think about all the kids coming, all the kids just learning their instrument. Like, if you're not a genius composer, you can write something super simple. And
Right.
I know from experience that the horn education books for very beginners, most of them are not, I don't like them actually. I don't think they start on the right note, to be honest. And I've thought about
Right.
that for a long time. Like, why do they start them on a second line G? That's too high for most people.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's like the first note they learn.
There's all kinds of opportunities out there for this kind of stuff, but that's what passive income is about.
Yeah.
And that's an area where musicians again have this advantage in that there's all kinds of opportunities for passive income in the music world, and all it takes is time, which is something that a lot of times musicians who aren't working enough or are worried about their active income, they have time.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Right.
like, and not to go back to this, but I loved Phil's, Phil saying, hey, I work 8 hours a day. If I don't have a job, I'm composing or arranging or doing something.
Right.
That's my job.
Right.
Not my job is not to sit around and wait for the phone to ring. My job is to do this other thing.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of things there. Now, again, with the real estate, that's a path towards passive income, because if you're young and maybe you're just by yourself, but you buy a 1-bedroom condo or something like that, and you make sure that your realtor is a good one so that you learn whether or not you can rent it, but make sure you buy one that can be rented. But then when you're done with it, you can keep it forever and ever and ever and rent it out as a passive income stream.
Mm-hmm.
And then, someday sell it or pass it on to your kids and let them sell it. And if you hold real estate, look, the real estate market can be volatile inside 10 years. But you go out 20 and it's pretty hard to lose.
Yeah.
When I talk to sellers and they say to me, we bought our house in, 1999 or 1998, I know right away we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not worried.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Because it's 5 years, yeah, you can take a bath. 2 years, it's a risk. Even 10 years, there was a 10-year period. Right now, the 10-year period right now, people bought in 2007, 2008. It's 10 years right now. And some of those people aren't doing so great, right? They might lose a little money. But if they hang in there for another 10, so if you hold a property forever and ever, you're probably, historically, you're going to do pretty well there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So.
And if you're
Totally.
smart about buying something that you can rent out later, even, we talked to, during this whole conversation, I'm thinking a lot about Janet Ingle. We had her on the podcast, and she has passive income streams that she didn't necessarily think that were going to be, she arranged a bunch of music for herself because she wanted to do a unique recital, and then people started approaching her, hey, where do I get that? Did you
Right.
arrange that? And then that was when it occurred to her to put it out there and sell it,
Right.
and she'd had a reed business for a really long time. And then
There's another one. Well, that's active though, isn't it? Because you have to make the reed.
You're right. She does have to make the reed, so that's active. But the other passive thing, she had bought a condo right around not a good time, real estate time, like 08, 09 or something, at the height of the market. And she bought a condo on the north side of Chicago, and so many of her gigs were in Northwest Indiana, and she was just battling traffic. So she decided they were in a situation where selling it was not going to be viable. So they rented it, and they rented
Right.
it for a few years. And then when the market came better, she was able to sell it for a good price. So
Right.
that's the thing that you can do. If you do get into trouble, usually you can rent it out.
That's right. There's, hey, whether or not you'll be cash positive when you rent it out is going to be a function of the mortgage that you have.
Right.
But it isn't, the loss from that is, guess what?
A write-off.
Deductible.
Yeah.
That's a tax deductible business loss.
It
Yeah.
is. And
There's nothing better in the world.
Yeah, if you have a financial person, they can tell you that. If you don't
Yep.
have a financial person, then you don't know that. And that's part
Right.
of the problem. Like you have to, that's part of the reason why you want to keep somebody around you who can, teach you about that the situation you're in isn't as bad as you think it is.
Right.
Right.
Or tell
Whenever,
you if it is.
or tell
I
you
mean,
if
Yeah,
it
or tell
is.
you if it is. Yeah,
I mean,
like
I'll give you an example. I know I have some clients this year who owned a condo, very similar situation, where they had bought this condo. The wife had bought the condo, and then there was a change in relationships and marriages, and the new couple have been keeping this condo and renting it for years and years and years. And through their financial advisor, they determined that it was no longer the right way to. This was losing too much money on a monthly basis, and it made more sense to bite the bullet and sell it for less than what they paid for it. And they actually had to bring. I've had this happen before. They've had to bring money to the settlement table in order to sell it. Now, look, this isn't necessarily normal, but this is a 10-year ago thing, right?
yeah.
But in the end, it turns out to be I guess my point is there's good decisions and there's bad decisions, but there's an answer for everything. There's a move you can make now that's the right move. It may not be the greatest move ever, but it's still better than the other move, which was
Sure.
for them keeping it forever and ever. So they kind of got through this thing, and they were so grateful. Like, it's amazing that you wouldn't think that somebody who lost money in a transaction would be grateful, but the stress associated with that was pretty high.
Right.
So they were really grateful. So I guess my point is, no matter how bad it is, there's a decision that can be made, but you have to be able to look at it and go, okay, what are the things we should do? It's so hard not to just panic, which is what which is what I would want to do, but you have to fight that, and you have to be willing to look at these things.
Yeah. And also, I'll say this too. I think an important aspect of money, and John, I'm interested in your perspective on this, is you have to be willing to live with and work with time and timing.
Right.
I think people try and be way too immediate about money. And I count myself in the same, camp at times. I've had moments of this and I've had moments where I haven't been this, but I think there's this, I understand the desire for immediate gratification, but so much about money is understanding time and timing. And I just want to know what you have to say about that.
Well, I've never encountered a financial situation that doesn't change, in a couple of months. And that's one of the great things about being an entrepreneur is that,
Yes.
Your next big lead or your next, big opportunity as a freelance musician is right around the corner. It's the person that you're going to meet tomorrow. And you just don't know. Whereas if you have an air quotes real job, it's just the same every month after month after month. And so, these things will change, and you need to learn to be flexible and to learn to go, okay, this is what it is right now. We'll make some adjustments, and we're gonna keep working. We're gonna keep doing the activities, whatever they are for you, and things will come around. And but you're right, timing is huge, and there are people who do great with that, and there are people who sometimes don't. But the ones who think about it are the ones that do better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In terms of time.
Totally.
Right. Okay, so let's recap the 4 to 5 things that classical musicians should do when it comes to money, just like to wrap it up.
Okay.
So we've got keep track of your money, right? Know your numbers.
Know your numbers.
Know
right?
your
Know
numbers.
your freaking numbers, man.
Yeah, really know
I mean,
them.
if there's one thing that people who are maybe just starting out with some of these concepts, this is the first place to start. And if I can provide a spreadsheet basically that allows you to do this, but basically what you have to do is write down what all your expenses are, and write down what all your income is, and add the two things up. And keep doing that. And
Yep.
and that's very different from looking in your bank account and seeing how much money is left.
That's correct. It has nothing. It actually has nothing to do with your bank account.
Zero.
This is completely
Has nothing to
separate
do.
from your bank account.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
I don't really reconcile my.
I don't either. I don't reconcile my bank statements.
I don't know what that
either do
means, to be
Yep.
honest with
I
you.
don't do that either.
But I do know I have a huge spreadsheet. I can tell you exactly how much we spent on groceries last month, and I'm willing to bet most people can't.
Yep.
And so that's what we're talking about. How much money did you make last month? How much money are you thinking you're going to make next month?
Mm-hmm.
How much money did you spend last month and on what?
Yep.
And was it tax deductible? And how much do you think you're going to spend on those things next month? Is it going to be the same? Is it changing? Is there something big coming up? Like if you have a kid who's going to college like I do, like all of a sudden I've got this big payment on my spreadsheet every 4 months that I need to look at, right?
Right.
Okay. So absolutely knowing your numbers. And if you don't do anything else, do that.
Yep.
And keep it up for 6 months and see, and the whole way you look at money will change.
You will learn more about yourself in that 6 months than you ever knew about yourself before that.
That's right. I agree completely.
And you will know about your behavior and your habits better by looking at that than anything else you look at.
And by the way, we don't do that just to stop spending money. The idea is
it has nothing to do with that for me. But
right,
yeah.
we're not interested in telling you, to stop spending money and that you should be saving more. I'm not one of those people at all. I'm a horrible spender. But at least I know how much I spend. Okay,
right.
So
that's good. No, this is good advice. This is really good advice. And I'm better with my finances than I ever was before. And I need to do the spreadsheet thing. I did it on just a document, but I need to do it like on a spreadsheet. I'm gonna take your advice, John. I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll surprise you if you look at it every month. It'll surprise you.
Okay.
So let's see, what are the next things? I guess, and this is something I think we planned to talk about a little bit more than we actually did. I don't think I came right out and said this, so I'll say it now. Stop looking at expenses as a bad thing.
Right.
And I'm going to repeat that because it's so bizarre. But people, here's the musician version of that. If I drive to Harrisburg and play Harrisburg Symphony and I earn X amount of money, but I had spent this much on gas and I spent this much on meals and I had to pay a babysitter and I only walk away with $300, then is it worth it to do the job? Right?
Yeah.
Because what you're looking at there is called the net. That's what the net income from the job is.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is stop taking the expenses for the individual job and comparing it to the income from the individual job. Mm-hmm. And look at expenses, add that travel expense into a column for July that says musician travel expenses, and the income from Harrisburg goes in income.
Right.
Harrisburg Symphony, income July, is whatever that number is, and all of the travel expenses from playing music go somewhere else. They're not related. This is a really bizarre concept, I know, but they're not really related to each other because the expenses are okay. They're normal. You have to have these things in order to do your career.
I'm guilty of this. I'm the first to admit it.
Look, and you can disagree with this. There are people who will disagree with this and go, well, that's bullshit. There's, if the job doesn't net a positive cash flow, what's the point of doing it? Okay. If the job is a job you love and the musical experience is a good one,
yes,
and there's the potential for other good things to come out of going and doing the job.
Okay, that's good to add that to there as a caveat, I really think, because
that has to be part of the equation.
Yeah.
Right? So I'll give you should I give a personal example? I once went to a Harrisburg Symphony summer concert, And I'm willing to bet that while we were there, we didn't make a penny because we took both of our kids with us. We had 2 hotel rooms. We were there for 5 days. We had a party every night at the hotel after the concert. We ate out 3 meals a day for 2 adults and 2 kids. If we broke even, it was a miracle. But while I was there, I got a referral from a guy in the orchestra I barely knew whose father was moving to Philadelphia, and he bought a $600,000 condo from me, and I earned whatever that is, $15,000 from that.
Right.
That's great.
So,
That's awesome.
So do I care about the expenses from,
No.
And there are other examples of that other than just me because I'm a realtor. If you go there and you meet somebody and it turns out that you're going to collaborate on something better, then it's important to go to these events.
But I think also there's a little added thing I want to just point out here. John, I think that you are, how do I say this? You have eyes and ears for opportunity all the time. And I think that's what people are missing. Why they get so caught up in that myopic view, which, I completely get it because I would get caught up in it too. But it's because they're not seeking opportunity while they're there.
Okay. Well,
you know what I mean?
Then you're right. You shouldn't go. I absolutely if your goal is to go someplace and just sit down and play your job and come back and it's a failure if you didn't net X number of money, then guess what? You're right. You shouldn't go.
Well, this is just a frame of mind that people can learn to shift, and they can learn
if they want to.
Because right. I'm thinking about I'm thinking of all these instances in my career where I either did the gig or didn't, depending on these certain situations, and I can give loads of examples. But last summer I got to go and sub with the Chicago Symphony, but they don't pay travel, and that's okay because I wanted to do that gig, and then
so that was okay.
So that was okay, and I ended up spending a lot of money to get there, and then I didn't want to be 2 weeks without my daughter at her age, and so my husband and daughter met me, which was more flights to pay for, but then I got to see my family because I have lots of family up there, so there was that, and it ended up being some passive income because one of the concerts was recorded. So yeah, so there's that was a situation where actually at the moment I was like, is this the right thing? I really want to do this gig, and I'm spending a lot of money on airfare right now, so there was that sort of conflict going on.
And sometimes the answer is no, right? Sometimes the answer should be no. It doesn't make sense. But what I'm saying is don't let the net income be the only thing you're looking at.
I get it. It makes a lot of sense. I think if people would start to think about, it didn't occur to me to think, maybe I'm going to meet someone at this gig who's going to introduce me to another person who will hire me or whatever. You never know. And if people are thinking in that way, they might see opportunities that they wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Right. That's a little bit closer to what I have written in the notes here is stop looking at its expenses as taking away from your income. Right. And I think that's as good a way to put it as any. Expenses are expenses. They're a separate thing from income.
They are.
Yeah. They're related, but not really.
Expenses are a big picture and income is a big picture. It's not based on each individual gig.
That's right. Right.
Exactly.
If you look at some other examples of other kinds of businesses that have expenses, I'm struggling here, but the NFL, look at a large, huge organization like that. They have huge expenses.
Sure.
And so you have to make intelligent choices about your expenses. And you have to look at the income and the expenses, but I think it's a mistake to look at every job and go, I'm not leaving the house because at the end of the day I'm only going to make X amount of money.
That makes sense. Yeah. So the third thing was pay someone else to do your taxes. Couldn't agree more. I still know so many musicians who do their own taxes, and every year at tax time they're digging around the bottom underneath their car seats for receipts and stuff. It's like,
Right, right,
seriously, people? I mean,
right.
I'm not going to say I'm the most organized person in the world, but
I'm not either.
I'm not going.
I'm not that organized. But the
I'm not
one
doing
thing
my
I
own
know,
taxes. I know that
I'm not
much.
doing my own taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing I've learned about taxes is, it's not, you should keep all your receipts. Don't get me wrong. But the reality of taxes is that, the ways you know what, I can't even talk about auditing because it's like, it feels like a kinahera, if you know what that means. I don't want to, I don't want to, I don't want to, I don't want to fly in the face of the world. But anyway, yes, get somebody else to do your
Other
taxes
people,
for you.
yes.
Keep track of your expenses, and that's smart, to keep your receipts and have them match up, and make sure that your return is reasonable, that it looks reasonable. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Totally.
And the last thing we had on the docket for today was just to buy property. You think buying property as soon as you can is the way to go, and tell us
Of course,
more
I
about
do.
that.
I kind of have a vested interest in that, but
Well, yeah.
I mean, I
Sure.
am a realtor, and that's how I earn a fair amount of money. But honestly, we bought property. I guess we were 1997, so we were in our 30s. I wish we had done it earlier.
I wish actually I had done it in my 20s when, I mean, there were some opportunities there that I just sort of walked from.
Yeah,
Really?
and
Yeah. Yeah.
the people I know the people that I know who have done the best financially are the ones that own property for the longest. If you look at the most successful people in the world, financially, you'll notice that they own a ton of property.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
other than the stock market, which again, the big disadvantage to the stock market is that you need to have a lot of your own money, and with real estate, you get to borrow, up to 96.5% of the value of the home. If you get an FHA loan, you get to borrow the money to make your investment, and you also get to live there and not have to pay rent. So it really is a win-win. Happy to talk to anybody even if you don't live in my area, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to set you on the right course. And it's a smart thing to do. It's a shortcut to adulthood,
It's an adult hack.
It's an adult hack. That's right. Exactly.
It's an
Owning your own
adulting
property.
hack.
And you can do it. It's not that difficult.
Well, John, we will put your information in the show notes so that people can link to contacting you. And of course, you're on Facebook as well. So I can put whatever you prefer to be contacted, however you like to do that. We'll put it in the show notes. And also, if your financial advisor wanted her information, or if that was okay with her, to share in the show notes as well, because I think it's a great first step for people, even if it's just a conversation.
Exactly.
I never would have had these conversations when I was in my 20s or even 30s, early 30s. Right. So it's great. I think this is a great talk, and I really appreciate that you're offering your help and your knowledge to people. So appreciate that.
Well, and I should also say that if I'm happy to talk. I'm happy to talk to anybody kind of about anything. I mean, talking to people is what I do. And so, please feel free, if you're out there listening and you have questions about, or you want to challenge some of the things that I said, or you have questions about some of the things that I said, please feel free to call me anytime. Happy to talk to anybody.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And everyone, if you're enjoying Crushing Classical, please write a review on iTunes and join the conversation in the Facebook group at facebook.com/group/Crushing Classical. It's called Classical Cats. And then we're also on Facebook at Crushing Classical and Instagram at Crushing Classical. That's where we're continuing the conversation. So thanks again, John, so much. And we'll see you next time.
Okay. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.